If I Stay, 4:47 p.m., Chapter 8. Mom once snuck me into a casino. We were going on vacation to Crater Lake and we stopped at a resort on an Indian reservation for the buffet lunch. Mom decided to do a bit of gambling and I went with her while Dad stayed with Teddy, who was napping in his stroller. Mom sat down at the dollar blackjack tables. The dealer looked at me, then at Mom, who returned the mildly suspicious glance with a look sharp enough to cut diamonds, followed by a smile more brilliant than any gem. The dealer sheepishly smiled back and didn't say a word. I watched Mom play, mesmerized. It seemed like we were in there for 15 minutes, but then Dad and Teddy came in search for us, both of them grumpy. It turned out we had been there for over an hour. The ICU is like that. You can't tell what time of day it is or how much time has passed. There's no natural light, and there's a constant soundtrack of noise. Only instead of the electronic beeping of slot machines and the satisfying jangle of quarters, it's the hum and whir of all medical equipment, the endless muffled pages over the PA, and the steady talk of the nurses. I am not entirely sure how long I have been in here. A while ago, the nurse I liked with a lifting accent said she was going home. I will be back tomorrow. But I want to see you here, sweetheart, she said. I thought that was weird at first. Wouldn't she want me to be home or move to another part of the hospital? But then I realized that she meant she wanted to see me in this ward as opposed to dead. The doctors keep coming around and pulling up my eyelids and waving around a flashlight. They are rough and hurried, like they don't consider eyelids worthy of gentleness. It makes you realize how little in life we touch one another's eye. Maybe your parents will hold an eyelid up to get out a piece of dirt, or maybe your boyfriend will kiss your eyelids light as a butterfly just before you drift off to sleep. But eyelids are not like elbows or knees or shoulders, parts of body accustomed to being jostled. The social worker is at my beside now. She's looking through my chart and talking to one of the nurses who normally sits at the big desk in the middle of the room. It is amazing the way they watch you here. If they are not waving pen lights in your eyes or reading the printouts that come tumbling out from the bedside printers, then they are watching your vitals from a central computer screen. If anything goes slightly amiss, one of the monitors starts bleeping. There's always an alarm going off somewhere. At first it scared me, but now I realize that half the time when the alarms go off, it's the machine that are malfunctioning, not the people. The social worker looks exhausted, as if she wouldn't mind crawling into one of the open beds. I am not her only sick person. She had been shuttling back and forth between patients and families all afternoon. She's the bridge between the doctors and the people, and you can see the strain of balancing between those two worlds. After she reads my chart and talks to the nurses, she goes back downstairs to my family, who have stopped talking in hushed tones and are now all engaged in solitary activities. Gran is knitting, Brahms is pretending to nap, and Diane playing Sudoku. My cousins are taking turns on a Game Boy. The sound turned to mute. Kim has left. When she came back to the waiting room after visiting the chapel, she found Mrs. Shane a total wreck. She seemed so embarrassed and she hustled her mother out. Actually, I think having Mrs. Shane there probably helped. Comforting her gave everyone else something to do, a way to feel useful. Now they're back to feeling useless, back to the endless wait. When the social worker walks into the waiting room, everyone stands up like they are greeting royalty. She gives a half smile, which I have seen her do several times already today. I think it's a signal that everything is okay or status quo. And she's just here to deliver an update, not to drop a bomb. Mia is still unconscious, but her vital signs are improving. She tells assembled relatives who have abandoned their distractions haphazardly on the chair. She's in the way respiratory therapist right now. They're running tests to see how her lungs are functioning, whether she can be weaned off the ventilator. That's the good news then, Aunt Diane asked. I mean, if she can breathe on her own, then she will wake up soon. The social worker gives a practiced sympathetic nod. It's a good step if she can breathe on her own. It shows her lungs are healing and her internal injuries are stabilizing. The question mark is still the brain contusions. Why is that? Cousin Heather interrupts. Why don't we don't know when she will wake up on her own or the extent of damage to her brain. These first 24 hours are the most critical and Mia is getting the best possible care. Can we see her? Gramps asks. The social worker nods. That's why I'm here. I think it would be good for Mia to have short visit, just one or two people. We will go, Gramps says, stepping forward. Gramps is by her side. Yes, that's what I thought, the social worker says. We won't be long. So she says to the rest of the family. The three of them walk down the hall in silence. In the elevator, the social worker attempts to prepare my grandparents for the sight of me, explaining the extent of my external injuries, which look bad but are treatable. It's the internal injuries that they are worried about, she says. She's acting like my grandparents are children, but they are tougher than they look. Gramps was a medic in Korea, and Gran, she's always rescuing things, birds with broken wings. A sick beaver, a deer hit by a car. The deer went to wildlife sanctuary, which is funny because Gran usually hates deer. They eat up her garden. Pretty rats, she calls them. Tasty rats is what Gramps call them when he grills up venison steaks. But that one deer, Gran couldn't bear to see it suffer, so she rescued it. Part of me suspects she thought it was one of her angels. One of her angels. Still, when they come through the automatic double door into the ICU, both of them stop as if repelled by an invisible barrier. Grant takes Gramps' hand, and I try to remember if I have ever seen them hold hands before. Grant scans the bed for me, but just as the social worker starts to point out where I am, Gramps sees me and he strides across the floor to my bed. Hello, Duck, he says. He hasn't called me that in age, not since I was younger than Teddy. Gran walks slowly to where I am, taking light gulps of air as she comes. Maybe those wounded animals weren't such good prep after all. The social worker pulls over two chairs, setting them up at the foot of my bed. Mia, your grandparents are here. She motions for them to sit down. I will leave you alone now. Can she hear us? Gran asks. If we talk to her, she will understand. Truly, I don't know. The social worker responds, but your presence can be soothing as long as what you say is soothing. Then she gives them a stern look, as if to tell them not to say anything bad to upset me. I know it's her job to warn them about things like this, and that she's busy with 1,000 things and can always be so sensitive. But for a second, I hate her. After the social worker leaves, Gran and Gram sit in silence for a minute. The Gran starts prattling on about the orchard she's growing in her greenhouse. I notice that she has changed out of her gardening smock into a clean pair of corduroy pants and a sweater. Someone must have stopped by her house to bring her fresh clothes. Cramp is sitting very still, and his hands are shaking. He is not touched. He's not much of a talker, so it must be hard for him being ordered to chat with me now. Another nurse comes by. She is dark-haired and dark-eyed, brightened with a lot of shimmery eye makeup. Her nails are acrylic and have hard decals on them. She must have to work hard to keep her nails so pretty. I admire that. She's not my nurse, but she comes up to Gran and Gram just the same. Don't you doubt for a second that she can hear you, she tells them. She's aware of everything that's going on. She stands there with her hands on her hips. I can almost picture her snapping gum. Gran and Gram stare at her, lapping up what she is telling them. You might think that the doctors or nurses or all this is running the show, she says, gesturing to the wall of medical equipment. Nana, she's running the show. Maybe she's just biding her time. So you talk to her, you tell her to take all the time she needs, but to come on back. You are waiting for her. Mom and Dad would never call Teddy or me mistakes, or accidents, or surprises, or any of those other stupid euphemisms, but neither one of us was planned, and they never tried to hide that. Mom got pregnant with me when she was young, not teenager young, but young for their set of friends. She was 23, and she and Dad had already been married for a year. In a funny way, Dad was always a bow tie wearer, always a little more traditional than you might imagine, because even though he had blue hair and tattoos and wore leather jackets and worked in a record store, he wanted to marry Mom back at the time when the rest of his friends were still having drunken one night stands. Girlfriend is such a stupid word, he said. I couldn't stand calling her that, so we had to get married so I could call her wife. Mom, for her part, had a messed up family. She didn't go to any gory details with me, but I knew her father was long gone, and for a while she had been so much touch with her mother, though now we saw Grandma and Papa Richard, which is what we call Mom's stepfather, a couple times a year. So Mom was taken not just with Dad, but with the big, mostly intact, relatively normal family he belonged to. She agreed to marry Dad even though they had been together just a year. Of course, they still did it their way. They were married in a lesbian justice of the peace while their friend played a guitar feedback heavy version of the wedding march. The bride wore a white French flapper dress and black spiked boots. The groom wore leather. They got pregnant with me because of someone else's wedding. One of the dad's music buddies who had to Seattle had gotten his girlfriend pregnant, so they were doing the shotgun wire thing. Mom and Dad went to the wedding, and at the reception they got a little drunk and back to the hotel weren't as careful as usual. 3 months later, there was a thin blue line on the pregnancy test. The way they tell it, neither felt particularly ready to be parents. Neither one felt like an adult yet, but there was no question that they would have me. Mom was adamantly pro-choice. She had a bumper sticker on the car and read, "If you can't trust me with a choice, how can you trust me with a child?" But in her case, the choice was to keep me. Dad was more hesitant, more freaked out, until the minute the doctor pulled me out, and then he started to cry. "That's poppycock," he would say. The mom recounted the story. "I did no such thing." "You didn't cry then?" Mom asked in a sarcastic amusement. I teared. I did not cry. Then Dad winked at me, pantomimed, weeping like a baby. Because I was the only kid in Mom's and Dad's group of friends, I was a novelty. I was raised by the music community with dozens of aunties and uncles who took me in as their own little foundling. Even after I started showing a strange preference for classical music, I didn't want for real family either. Gran and Gramps lived nearby and they were happy to take me for weekends, so Mom and Dad would twirl and stay out all night for one dad shows. Around the time I was 4, I think my parents realized they were actually doing it, raising a kid, even though they didn't have a ton of money or real jobs. We had a nice house with cheap rent. I had clothes, even if they were hand-me-downs from my cousin, and I was growing up happy and healthy. You're like an experiment, Dad said, surprisingly successful. We thought it must be a fluke. We needed another kid as a kind of control group. They tried for 4 years. Mom got pregnant twice and had 2 miscarriages. They were sad about it, but they didn't have the money to do all the fertility stuff the people do. By the time I was 9, they decided that maybe it was for the best. I was becoming independent. They stopped trying. As if to convince themselves how great it was to not to be towed down by a baby, Mom and Dad brought us tickets to go visit New York for a week. It was supposed to be music pilgrimage. We would go to CBGB's and Carnegie Hall, but when to her surprise Mom discovered she was pregnant, and then to her greatest surprise stayed pregnant past the first trimester. She had to cancel the trip. She was tired and sick to her stomach and so grumpy. Dad joked that she had probably scared the New Yorkers. Beside, babies were expensive and we need to save. I didn't mind. I was excited about a baby, and I knew that Carnegie Hall wasn't going anywhere. I would go there someday.